Hello, have we started yet?
We have not.
Okay, thanks.
5480.
I wasn't paying attention.
I've been asked to be on your committee. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And myself.
That's the subcommittee number 2.
Subcommittee, yeah, subcommittee number 2. And, so we have some things in here.
Amy, are you ready to start the meeting?
Hi, yeah, we're ready to start. Dennis is gonna run it since I'm online and have very little visibility with bad bandwidth.
Thank you.
Guess it's on me then. Okay, good afternoon. I would like to call the April 1st, 2026 Joint County City Outdoor Lighting Code Committee to order. Could we have a roll call, please? Musical track.
Alabama's here.
Get some of that southern charm in there.
Okay, Amy Oliver,
Present online.
Dennis Kuhn,
Here?
Craig Barron,
Here.
Robert East,
Here.
Buell Januzzi,
Here.
Daniel Sleeter,
Here.
Alex Zimmerman. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to go ahead with our agenda and move on to item number 2, which is approval of minutes, legal action report from February 4th of 2026. I know that was distributed to committee members, so I'd be looking for a motion. Is
Make a motion to accept. I second the motion to accept.
there any discussion? We have a roll call, or not a roll call, just in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. We'll then move on to item 3 on our agenda, which is subcommittee reports. And I don't know, Amy, if you want to say anything on that, or if you want me to report on our subcommittee meeting.
I'm sorry, if you will do that. I'm having a hard time even getting my microphone sometimes to unmute. I couldn't even unmute for the last call.
Okay, so our subcommittee, which is Amy, myself, and Craig Barron, we met on March 23rd, and we talked about a number of things. And part of it is looking at what work we can have our technical subcommittee do. And we decided that Craig is going to work with the technical subcommittee, which was put together last time as Rob East and Alec and now Craig. And what we would like to have them do are a number of things. One is to just do a quick review of chapter 8, which is about right-of-ways, and to see if there's anything there that needs to have any adjustment made. We've had very few or no public comments on that. And I don't think in our working subcommittee, we haven't really addressed it too much. So we thought that was the thing to look at, in particular the light levels that are listed in that section, the roadway lighting. Another issue would be to look in general at the idea of having a master lighting plan and how that could be implemented. And, I think, Bob, you may have some ideas on that. And, just what we need to have in the code and how to do it. We talked about, overhangs and canopies, and it related to some preliminary information that we had from our consultant about the idea of, particularly in residential occupancies, needing lights on people's faces so they could identify someone that might be coming through their front door. And the issue of whether canopies actually does enough for that. If someone's using a fully shielded light under the canopy, some light bounces off the canopy and does provide lighting, and perhaps we can avoid getting more unshielded lighting to do that. That was something, again, that maybe with some input from Alec and Rob, that we'd just like to have them weigh in on that. Another thing would be to look at the about problems of implementing lumen caps on multi-story buildings. The problem being that some multi-story buildings may have exterior circulation on them that needs illumination. So when you start building up, you could very well run into the lumen cap. And so it would be a matter of deciding whether and how we could put some type of allowance in for that. I'm particularly concerned if lumen caps are adjusted in the final code, adjusted downward, that we could create a problem with the egress lighting if that were to happen. There were a couple of diagrams that need to be added, chapter 4 for 401.2.1.2 and 401.2.1.3, and perhaps it could draw up those diagrams that can go into the code. Then,
Yeah, that's, I had a quick question.
absolutely.
You sound like you're working off the list. Is that list been published there?
Don't know. Amy put the list together and she gave me a copy.
You have it in hand?
I have it in hand and I can certainly scan it.
Somehow we should circulate that, so Craig, Alex, and I are not thinking things up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for the benefit of everybody, that might go through the list, just so you know what we looked at, what we talked about.
Yeah, we just went through that list last week at our subcommittee meeting.
Yeah, we had an agenda, and this is the result of everything that we discussed. So we talked quite a bit about signs in chapter 5, and it moved all over the place because maybe the most broad question is, what is a sign versus say outline lighting on a building? And I guess we're thinking that we don't have that well enough described. And it's also because there's so many of these are going into blue light and a lot of outline lighting on buildings, and it's can become unregulated because what's happening, people are saying, well, all the canopy or the outline lighting on the buildings, it's part of the signage. And is it really signage or is it lighting? And we just feel like the code doesn't have enough in it, so we're thinking that that's something that the second subcommittee could at least take a stab at.
You define what you mean by the outline lighting. We're talking about, somebody brought up gas station canopy and then having.
This is the Victor Regis blue lighting.
Yeah, those were a few photos that we took in the subcommittee, for the subcommittee meeting. The very front page is a canopy on a gas station, and that horizontal stripe of light surrounds the canopy is sort of part of the signage package.
So it's also branding, you know, that's part of.
Definitely, the shell itself is branded. There's a picture of another outline lighting, but it's clearly architectural lighting. It doesn't really connect to the sign. And then there's some of these that have very, very strong, not white light, so it doesn't count as, is it, what's the Kelvin temperature? Well, it doesn't have a Kelvin temperature. And yet these are going in and, they're contributing to sky glow. And how do we address those? So I think we'd like to get input from Alex. Craig's always given a lot of input, but he'll be there.
Half of these are probably installed by the signage company and half by the electrician, so it is a gray area.
And the reason it's such a gray area when it comes to the sign is that we're not regulating the lumens on the sign. And, it can say,
Signage is illuminated or limited by a square footage number by code, so it is limited. Should be limited.
so that might be a way to look at it is what happens when you have this, then you include that. How could you include that square footage of those linear elements as part of the signage? Maybe that's the way of handling it, but you've got more familiar with that than some of us.
So this committee, we cannot regulate everything. So I think we should pick and choose what we can regulate. I think this is a discussion. And part of this is the sign vendor would install it. It will never show up on building plan. It would only show up as part of the signage package. But usually with signage, you apply a square foot number across the site, building. Get X amount of square feet of signage.
And it's easy to do if you have a conventional sign. But what I'm noticing, and I noticed it as part of what I end up doing in special inspections, are seeing that it's so easy now to do things that aren't conventional the way they were done in the past. And so we've got current rules on signage that are really addressing the way signs were built 10 years ago and more. And now they're being done totally different.
No, we didn't, so you didn't have the product. Now you have the products, you can run these linear lights.
And you
cheaply.
can do it cheaply. That's-
Cheaply and efficiently with electricity. It's changed because the technology's changed. And you have 4 or 5 current prototypes from different tenants that are using kind of the same catchy light plus signage.
Yeah, the thing that we're always trying to do though is we have to look at what's the purpose of having these rules at all, which is we're trying to protect the dark sky. And, you know, maybe it's not as bad if it's an amber light that's emanating from signs, but if it's a blue light, that blue light goes up, gets caught by the air, comes back down again, and it's really, really affecting things. That's why we need to do something, but our subcommittee hasn't, the original subcommittee hasn't been able to do that, and we're thinking to spread the load, let you guys take a shot at it. And then we went back to talking about right-of-ways just a bit, and we had a little discussion about these larger private developments that build their own roadways within their property. They're not necessarily public roads, but they're illuminated. Would Chapter 8 be applying to them? I think it probably would not. And is there any other way of dealing with those roads, or do they just get caught as private property lumen cap within their lumen caps? Something you guys could look at and just see if we're handling it right or if it needs some adjustment.
So when I built the private roads, the street lighting is all calculated in the outdoor lighting code
As a lumen cap.
as part of the.
And so the issues could be though, in some areas, can you adequately illuminate the road by doing so?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know what area this is, but I'm not out on the fringes
Yeah.
on my project.
But things are being developed in the E1 areas and that's gonna be an issue. But again, there's not necessarily a requirement the roads get illuminated either.
Up in Moran, a lot of times people don't do it. I think for public safety, I think it's important to eliminate.
Yeah, it may depend on just what the densities are and all. Let's see, another on our subcommittee, we did review the public comments, a prior review of the public comments. And we feel that we have noted every comment made and the direction of those. And but one of the things we feel that we did talk about, we haven't come to resolution on all these, is in HOA governed areas, subdivisions, particularly where they have common spaces. You know, it's not completely clear how our code distinguishes applying a residential lumen cap and a commercial lumen cap. And we think that we're gonna do some clarification about what's the difference between what constitutes a project that has to be applied to the residential lumen caps and what's commercial. We're thinking that saying for the purposes of the outdoor lighting code, the term residential shall be regulated under the International Residential Code scope. So that means if what's being built is that the actual construction is happening under International Residential Code, then you would use residential lumen caps. All other construction, if it's governed by the ordinary, like the international building code, then it would be considered commercial. And so I think that's where we're going. We haven't put the words together yet, but I think Amy's working on some words to help with the beginning of chapter 4 to better explain the process of applying lumen caps and how to move through that. We're going to address, there's a diagram in chapter 4, 401.4.4. Amy was going to update that. And there's also a diagram and definitions that is showing a unshielded light fixture, a partially shielded light fixture, and a full cutoff light fixture. And we're going to redefine the partially shielded light fixture as just being unshielded. So there will actually be two images. One that is unshielded, which is a light that is obviously putting light out in all different directions. Another showing a light fixture that is predominantly down, but still has some uplight characteristics. Both of those are intended to be unshielded lights. And then one that has all the light going down, and that would be considered fully shielded. And we're also going to clarify the wording about curfews and how they can be applied. And the use of non-white light sources. But we've assigned that to the technical subcommittee to think about non-white light sources.
You're good.
And do we want to address where we stand with the consultant now and contracts, or is necessary?
Yeah, we haven't got very far. Yeah,
Yeah, we talked about that in our subcommittee.
Yeah. I can give an update on that real quick. Amy wanted you to know that she has already updated some of the diagrams,
Great.
so.
So that's what we went over in our subcommittee. So that's our subcommittee report.
Okay, as far as the lighting consultant, We were working on an extension. We have utilized them for 2 years. Now there's a discussion if we want to renew their contract or not. I've got the documents pretty much done that would need to go to the Board of Supervisors if we elect to go that route. So I need to have another discussion with my director and then probably with Wade and Corin on that, so.
Great, thank you. I think we can move on to item 4 on the agenda, which will be committee discussion. So, again, the committee can, anybody has anything they want to bring up? Anybody? Okay, I'll move on to item 5, call to the audience. Time that anybody can address us if you'd like to. Have any?
I have a couple
Go
of
ahead.
questions. One is, a couple of meetings back, you guys were going through all the comments and started responding to all the comments that you got during the public comment period. What's the status of that and how is the public gonna know how Pima County and the city of Tucson are responding to all of those comments? So you don't have to answer that now, but I think we've been in various meetings where it's come up, it's like, what's the status of the responses to the public comments on the outdoor lighting code during the comment period? So just one, as it relates to the issue about signs, I guess my question is, if the exterior lighting does not illuminate text or the logo of the structure identified with the structure, how is it considered part of the sign? So that, I mean, I know you have examples from subcommittee that we have not seen, just part of the odd way this committee works. But when I think about a sign under Pima County's sign code and under the city of Tucson's sign code, it has an amount of square footage. It has the prescriptive size of the lettering of the sign, the whole area of where wording and text can be. So if you and the subcommittee are considering some lighting that is 15 feet away that is not illuminating any text, but because the consultant sold it as part of the sign package, that is inconsistent with the city of Tucson and Pima County sign code ordinances. So I would try, as you're wrestling with this topic, and I understand why it might be worth working through, whatever it is you come up with should be consistent with the definition of a sign that is in the existing adopted ordinances. So I would not try to go rogue there, just from my perspective.
So,
Yeah,
I appreciate your commentary. The problem that I see, and I've been dealing with this 20 years, is the building will go up.
Yep.
Like Dennis will show egress lighting and lighting that's required. And then you get the sign package that comes in with all these bells and whistles. It never goes back to the building department. Never gets reviewed as part of the building package, part of the sign package. And most reviewers, I don't think, dispute sign versus, no, this is general illumination. Somehow it's gotta get caught. So Taco Bell, make sure they're prototypes.
Oh, well, yes.
what I heard was
So
that
it's
there is we need a definition of a sign, and I'm sitting here going, the Pima County Board of Supervisors
Plan
and the Tucson City
Mhm.
Council adopted ordinances that included a definition of what
started
a
like
sign.
a week ago,
I don't think the subcommittee needs to
on
come
16th.
up with a new
And
definition.
then this morning, I came from Refkin.
It's getting lost in the process of review. That is not That is not our issue. That is somewhere internal to Pima County and.
So I think out of the committee that's gonna talk about it, I think maybe it comes out, it's not our issue. How can Pima County and the city of Tucson regulate this from the sign code better so it doesn't happen out in the field?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I heard that there's lighting on the exterior of the building that is not in any kind of geographic proximity to text on a sign that we might consider as part of a sign, I was like, okay, that if it's not getting caught in review under the lumen caps, that's an internal process. But it's clearly not part of the sign. And believe me, I've been as involved in the sign code ordinances as I am in the outdoor lighting code ordinances. So there is a definition of a sign for Pima County and the city of Tucson. And I think that that definition of a sign should be the same definition that is used by the outdoor lighting code. If there's lighting that is happening that falls outside of that, then there needs to be another process to address that. But it is not in changing a definition of what is a sign. Because if you want to open that up, God help us all, we'll never get this over the finish line.
Like,
This is Clayton with the city of Tucson. I just wanted to provide some additional context based on the recommendation to hear this topic. The definition of sign is pretty broad in the city's land use regulation. Specifically, the definition of a sign is every advertising message, announcement, declaration, display, illumination, insignia, surface, or space erected or maintained in a location outside any building and visible to the public for identification, advertising, or promotion of the interest of any person, entity, product, or service. It's extremely broad, but
I think message is the key word there.
I think
And identification. If it is a generic light that is not part of the identity of that corporation or that message, then it is not part of the sign. I mean, and I think that definition states that as broad as it's worded. Happy to fight that fight another day.
so this is Clayton with the city of Tucson again. Not trying to respond or give direction to the committee, just trying to bring context to the topic, which is the current outdoor lighting code does not clearly articulate the difference between the different types of illumination that was brought forward. And so from our perspective, I think it would be beneficial for the subcommittee to discuss the topic and provide some recommendations. But I would also support not trying to redefine the definition of sign in this code, if for no other reason than having definitions in more than one regulation create difficulties of consistency moving forward, where if any change occurs in the future, you would have to make that change in multiple locations. So the city of Tucson would support not redefining a term that is defined somewhere else.
Think of a new term. Linear branding. In other words, all those nice blue, yellow, red, LED, or whatever they are across the outside of the building. The owners of that property would consider it linear branding. Well, that's our brand. We do it all over the country and everything else. Because it's linear nature, doesn't have anything to do with the sign, just the look of the building. And Tucson is a whole different ballgame than what they do in other places in the country. So that's what we'll talk about in subcommittee.
and so that will all be going to the second subcommittee, which will have a new set of members providing input. And that's, you think that's our next step?
I have three more quick comments, and I know there are other people that may want to speak. In HOA common area, I would say that HOA managed common area is not commercial. Calling it commercial is, I think, not appropriate in context. I'm sure there's lots of people in the HOA world that can weigh in on this. Yeah. So, in our HOA managed common area, we are mandated by the jurisdiction to maintain natural open space as HOA common area. That will never be commercial. It is mandated natural open space. We are required, because of the lack of funding, to maintain public roadway rights of way landscaping. The jurisdictions require the HOAs to sign a license agreement for the maintenance of the landscaping and drainage in the public roadway right of ways. Some of that may include streetway lighting. And we have HOA recreational areas and parks that will not be accepted by the city of Tucson or Pima County for operation and maintenance due to a lack of funding. So we have parks, natural open space, and public roadway rights of way, which I don't think defining it as either residential or commercial is an appropriate definition. And each one of those has a different amount of lighting. Whether it is natural open space, the required license agreements for public roadway rights of way, or whether it is a private HOA park. Just as the subcommittee considers that. I think painting it with the commercial brush is, and again, other HOA folks can weigh in on that, but just from our perspective in terms of what we maintain. And within Rockington South, that will be 700 acres of HOA common area. So it's not an insignificant amount of common area that we're talking about. In terms of private streets that function as public roadways in campuses, that could be both residential and master plan communities, as well as commercial campuses. But those function as public roadways. So my contention would be, if they're open to the public and they are privately constructed and maintained but function as public roadway access roads, they should have the same standard as public roadways and not go against the lumen cap of that private development. Again, the private sector, because we as a state have a shortage of public funding, the private sector is assuming responsibility for what historically has been documented as things that the public sector constructed and maintained. I don't think we should be penalized because the private sector is constructing roads, constructing drainage, and assuming the roadway maintenance for things that historically have been publicly funded. So if it's a private roadway functioning in the same capacity as what would have been a public access roadway for a commercial development or a phased campus, I would consider some latitude to the lumen cap because it is performing a public function and it is relieving the public taxpayers of their obligation. Then my question, last two things. Has the subcommittee or the committee decided whether they are going to incorporate a master lighting plan option into the ordinance? I think the sooner we get some indication as to whether that is going to make it into the ordinance for these larger projects and phased developments, I think that will be helpful. Because we're an ordinance that is written for a single property owner and a single structure to try to do something that is a multi-phased campus in the world of economic development and projects where you have private sector investing decades at risk, we need an option for that. And I think the concept of the master lighting plan could provide that, but we haven't gotten any indication from this committee officially as to whether that is going to be incorporated into the ordinance. So that would be helpful to know. My last one has to do with zone 2 and those areas of zone 2 that are clearly experiencing employment growth and population growth and are in the 10-year comprehensive land use plans as growth areas. Whether they are going to be incorporated into zone 3 as existing and future urban areas. And when we might get some indication from the subcommittee or committee as it relates to the number of state land parcels that the mayor and council has approved PADs for. That whether it's H2K or a lot of the lands in the southeast where mayor and council have approved state land PADs, and it still has a zone 2 designation on it that might be worthy of consideration of moving that into zone 3. There is a lot of entitled land for development that is not adjacent to the ground-based observatories that is struggling with the criteria that is in the last draft for zone 2. One of the ways to address that is to recognize those areas. The voters of the city of Tucson have approved their general plan. It has growth areas and it is still being constrained by the zone 2 designation, as are some of the lands in Marana along I-10 and other lands throughout the region. So if we could get an indication on the master lighting code and some of the thoughts of the committee as it relates to zone 2 in those acknowledged growth areas, that would be helpful. Thank you. I know you missed me.
Thank you. I appreciated hearing all those points and many of those issues we are working on.
I assume so, but it'd be good to go from there to here.
And we don't have them worked out yet. It's the issue. And that's why they're going to a subcommittee too. And specifically points that you addressed, they're going to.
We have a member from the online public, Eloise.
Absolutely,
Hi.
go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I represent Sunrise Mountain Ridge Homeowners Association, and we filed comments, and I know you've reviewed them. All I wanted to try to understand were the things that you said that the previous speaker, I apologize, I can't see anybody except a few of you, so I don't know who was speaking a moment ago. But the same issues that she raised, I'm not asking for your decision. I'm trying to understand sort of where you are right now. So again, with respect to the private, what we call private roads that we build, we take care of, they're all within our community. We are not gated, but we do have no trespassing signs. So these are not areas that people should be driving through unless they live here or they're service providers coming here or invited guests. So could you just say a little more slowly so I can write this down for my colleagues, what it is you're talking about with, and we had been told that right-of-way, Chapter 8 may not apply to our private roads, but what does? What is it that you're contemplating? And I know you haven't decided finally on that. That's the first question. And then the second question we'll come to in a moment about the common areas.
What we determined in subcommittee and we felt was a reasonable way to move forward was to say that when construction occurs and the buildings are regulated by the International Residential Code, that project would be subject to the residential lumen caps. Any other construction that occurs and it's subject to the International Building Code, it would be subject to the commercial lumen caps, which are much higher. So you get more light.
I tell you right up front, I'm not familiar with the International Building Code. I'm happy to look at it. I've, always learning a lot from this experience. But, so what do you mean? So we, our situation is we have an HOA, we have 291 homes, we have 5 or 6 miles of roads that we build and maintain. So when you're saying what applies to the International Building Code with respect to residential, that would seem to me, we're definitely residential. We're absolutely in no way, shape, or form commercial, not our roads, not our common areas. So how are you suggesting this might play out for us?
What I'm saying is that the actual residential construction on the homes themselves and their lots are governed by the residential lumen caps. The other areas, if you had to build things in those areas and get building permits for them, they would be governed by the International Building Code. And those areas would be subject to commercial lumen caps, which is more light in those areas. You could use more light compared to the individual homes. So if you build a clubhouse, if you build an outdoor facility of some kind that requires construction to build walls or whatever, you'd be getting permits for those, and you'll be regulated by the commercial lumen caps in those areas. So that's where
you're saying that
subcommittee-
applies to the private roads? You're saying that applies to our common areas that are between and among and around our homes? I'm just asking what you're saying. I'm not in a position to argue with you. I just am trying to understand what you're saying.
Yes, the common areas would essentially all be governed by the commercial lumen caps. What would not be covered by the commercial caps and be residential would be single family, 2-family, 3-family, and 4-family dwelling units.
So
Those
only the private property areas where the homes are, we're all 1-story homes, and this is not, they're all individual homes. And people do have their own, backyard, front yard, side yard. So that would be residential, but it's governed by, you're saying, the international code for residential, not your code?
No, we're just saying that's a measure that can be used. If you build something in general, the overall building code that applies is either going to be the International Residential Code or the International Building Code. But the lighting codes also applies, but do you use residential or do you use the commercial standards for lumen caps? It depends on which building code is applied. That's what we're trying to say.
But you would be treating, it may work out to our benefit, but you would be treating our common areas that belong to the HOA as if they were commercial. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes. Unless your HOA actually owned a dwelling unit, a home, that say the HOA was made available to rent out or something, that home would still be considered residential. That's what our lighting code is trying to say.
Well, I guess we would be interested in knowing what that does to the lumen cap. And is it the same for the roads? The roads, our local privately built and maintained roads would also be treated as commercial because they're not the home?
Yes.
Wow. We kind of love to see how that might play out. We commented on with a whole different understanding, and we're happy to do so. And I know there's going to be a final comment period sometime in the future when you have a code that's been through the process. But I'm going to take this back to my colleagues, but it would just be nice if we had some idea of what the impact of that's going to be.
I don't understand what you mean by impact.
Well, we consider ourselves residential, and we were reading your code, the existing code, as well as the proposed changes, as applying a different standard to residential areas. And that's what we were looking at. And now what you're saying is that that would be true for my backyard, but for the area on the other side of my wall, which is common area, it would be considered commercial. And I would like to know what that would mean for the difference between lighting. So we have common areas within the community where we do have lighting because it's part of the community that everybody shares, even if there isn't a building on it. So that's what I'm just trying to understand. You know, like, so we light up a cactus, we light up a saguaro, and trying just on our own, because we really value dark skies, we're on our own limiting the amount that are facing up, and we're doing everything we can to face down and be fully shielded. We're on that already because we care about it. But as far as what your code would require, you know, what would that mean for that kind of thing? So we have a little common area island in the middle of the street, and there's a saguaro on it, and we want to put a light on it. You know, what do we look to?
Yeah, and what I just described, how it would be regulated, is you could put more light on the cactus, considering it commercial rather than residential, but it would be subject to a curfew if it's up like that, it's lit up from below, and those lights would have to be turned off at 11 p.m.
Right. Well, I think that's
Whereas
true.
if it was regulated as a residential, you'd have less total light that you could use, but it is not subject to the curfew on the unshielded light.
Okay, that's really helpful. That's really, really helpful. Thank you. And that's true for the roads as well.
Yeah, it would be, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I guess I'd like to, because we've had some discussion, we've had some input, and all that is what our second subcommittee needs to hear and work on to see if we've got other ideas from particularly you, Rob, and Alec, relating to these issues.
I think this sets it up for a master, site lighting program.
Yeah.
You know, how do you go in and, okay, I can separate my roads out as commercial. I can separate my common area space as commercial. I'm left with all these resi that falls under the resi code. So really it's two layers of outdoor lighting code codes that you may have because of the different uses on a project.
Yeah, let me throw one thing in there, and maybe agenda wise, I think we need to move back to item 4 on our agenda, which is committee discussion, which will help the subcommittee work a little bit. The thing that a master lighting plan could do, in my judgment, is that in a planned community, you may have residential located tight to commercial development. And under basic outdoor lighting code, there are certain things you have to do in the commercial development, like restricting light pole heights, restricting the amount of lights on the commercial side, with the intent of protecting the residential side. But if it's in a master plan community, the developers develop everything, maybe they want to have the freedom to regulate that the way that it suits them for their development. And therefore, by having a master lighting plan, there's a way that the developer can make their own decisions on how they deal with those kinds of issues. But the thing that, from a regulatory point of view, is that we need to make sure that that doesn't result in a master planned area overall having more light that would be more detrimental to the observatory interests or off-site from the whole development. So internally, they have more choice on how they do things and where they move their light around. But overall, the development would produce more light pollution than they otherwise would if everything was individually regulated. That's, I think that there's some way to put some words in place to accomplish that.
Buell had his hand raised.
Yes, go ahead, Buell.
Oh, I had lowered it, or I tried to lower it. But what I was gonna say was what you just said, that I think exploring the master development plan option, and I hope the subcommittee can find time to meet and do that soon, is potentially very productive.
Could someone tell me what a master lighting plan is?
This is something more for the people that are developing large parcels, and they're taking on some of the burden for tracking what's going on in the parcel, as opposed to an individual um, resident, and so they know what the plan is for the lighting of the whole parcel.
Ah. How would it affect our HOA?
I think it would depend on how the code gets
And-
written, whether it would apply or
Sign
not.
up for a master, lighting package. You'd be able to sort of, I don't want to say write your own rules, but you'd be able to, for instance, if you had outdoor open space that had no lights in it, you may be able to slide that over to your streets or to a common area, so there's ways you can move around your lighting lumens, for certain areas. It hasn't been written yet. There has been one that was written for the sign code. And why it was written is the sign code, if you really look at it, is for individual buildings. But when you start looking at a bigger project, it's good to have, the master sign program. Because once again, you can move things around. The master sign program gives you the ability to go actually larger than what code says, because it is a master sign program. So it would only help you, but your subdivision has been there for years. So I don't think you'd go back and sign up for one of these, but you could. Are you
Okay, do we have-
clear? Eloise?
Yes,
Yeah.
I hear that. Well, I mean, it helps in that what I'm writing down is it's larger, but it's not really relevant to us because we've been around for a while and, we're replacing a light bulb here or there, but, we're not building anything. So,
Yeah.
But if you wanted to, you could go sign up for it and redo all your lighting throughout your project. If you wanted to.
if we wanted to, right? But if we don't want to, then we're governed by the city county code individually.
And individually, that's kind of the key. The master program allows the developer to look at the project as a whole and decide how they want to use their lighting within that, as opposed to having to prove that each and every separate lot within by itself has to be.
Okay, that's much clearer. Thank you all.
Do we have any other public comments? Go ahead.
I have a question. What is it called what is the subcommittee called and who are the members and did you guys end up meeting last month?
Okay, we've now established two subcommittees. We've
Right.
had our longtime working subcommittee.
Right.
That's Amy Oliver, who's our chair, who is represents Smithsonian Observatory. Myself, I'm Dennis Kuhn. I'm an electrical engineer and primarily working for architects doing building design, which includes the lighting. And Craig Barron, who is representing member of public, and he has former his working life. He was involved in the lighting industry. So that's the working subcommittee. And now we've put together what we're calling the technical subcommittee, and that's going to be Craig Barron, and he will act as a liaison between the two committees. And then it's Rob East and Alex Zimmerman. Rob, you can explain your.
Just a person, a person.
Just a guy.
In answer to the question, no, we have not met yet.
Okay, but you guys were trying to meet last month, right?
No, that was the
That
original subcommittee.
So what I reported on was our meeting that we had on the original subcommittee, and we met on March 23rd. And it had been quite a while prior to that when we met last.
All right, thank you.
And just so you know, Alec is an electrical engineer and essentially doing the same thing I do. Go ahead.
Here, photos that were referenced earlier in the meeting of the gas station signage, are those publicly available or?
Correct. Should we?
They were just photos that I put together for the use internally in the subcommittee, just so that we could talk amongst ourselves and compare different things. And since we really haven't come up with any specific code rules yet, I don't think we're ready to distribute anything.
They were just the local gas stations, the local brew houses, you know, on Speedway and Broadway. If you drive by, you can see those all the time.
Perfect, thank you.
We have another question? Go ahead.
I'm Steve. I have, the previous questions were very good. I have, more basic questions. I'll get to those. But first, I just wanted to, say I know very little about lighting. I've been coming here for years. I've been watching for years. I'm learning a lot, and I commend you on the progress in the past year. But to simplify things, the private road situation, I'm a drainage engineer. I've worked on roadway projects. So if a city or a county road, a new road or widening goes in, how does the lighting code subject, how are they governed by the lighting code, and would that apply to private roads? It doesn't have anything to do with IPC or IRC.
Yeah, that's right. So in the current outdoor lighting code and in the proposed draft for the update, we have chapter 8, which talks about essentially lighting in public right of ways. So that's not private property, public right of way. And it's really got very few regulations in it, but it does require the lighting to be fully shielded. It has a color temperature limitation because the color of the light affects the observatories, because the more blue in light gets reflected down from the air. And it has some limitations on maximum illumination levels of the roadways. And those were based on IES, which is the Illuminating Engineering Society of North America, which is a private organization, but is sort of, they set up standards, what would be considered standards of practice, what should be done. And those illumination levels are in there basically as a cap for how bright the roads could be lit. So that's in the code, it is in the current adopted code, and for the most part, it's not changing at all.
So that chapter 8, that public right of way, doesn't have any application to private roads?
Well, that's the gray area, because the way Priscilla described it, and she is actually looking towards, it would like to treat her roads the same way a public road is treated, in which, and I.
Or I could give them back to the jurisdiction to build and maintain, either one.
You'd rather do the second.
We could probably get one, not the other.
Yeah, well, then minimally, we should get the treatment that is given to public roads when it is a condition of our rezoning approval or the condition of our plat, that we relieve the public taxpayer of that burden and take it onto our budget. Then I think we should get the same treatment. So it's one or the other. You cannot make the private sector take over public infrastructure responsibility and then raise the bar to be more punitive to us and treat it as private. We don't want to assume those roads. We're forced to assume those roads by the jurisdictions that are giving us the rezoning.
And so now I want to throw a monkey wrench in that, just because.
And the same for drainage. We get the same thing for drainage obligations.
So it seems entirely reasonable to me that those roads, if built to the same way as they would have, if they would have been a public road, but they're just built privately, and you still own them privately, but they're open for public use, that you should be able to illuminate them for the same standard as public roads. And that to me sounds perfectly reasonable. Then the question becomes, does the land area of those roads, does that get to be included in your development's lumen cap area? So that the lumens from there, then you can use somewhere else on the other lots. I'm thinking, no, you would exclude that area because you already have a different way that that light is being regulated on those areas. And it may very well allow more light on those roads than otherwise would be, but I think perhaps not because our lumen caps are fairly high.
My initial reaction is that it would be, I would agree with you that it would be excluded unless it is addressed in a master lighting plan where you kind of went through the whole campus to end up at development build out where you were balanced.
Yeah.
I mean, that would, I mean, with my initial response.
As simply as I can think of a master plan, you've got a development that is, say, 2/3 residential, 1/3 commercial. And if you looked at your whole, say, 50 acres, you could apply 2/3 of that acreage as residential, 1/3 as commercial, give you a lumen cap total. And then it would be reasonable for the master plan to say, well, that puts the lumen cap on the whole thing. Now you can use it however you want to within that. I don't know, is that the same place you're going?
I think that's part of it, but the one thing that we're leaving out of this whole dialogue, which is somehow we have to capture it, is that between 30 and 60% of new developments are being mandated as natural undisturbed open space. And that is a lot of that is developable land. I'm not talking about high biological resource land. I'm not talking about riparian corridors that have hardwood trees. I'm talking about upland scrub that is not in the floodway currently, but it is being taken out of development and it is mandated as natural undisturbed open space. In a county that has 12 or 13% private land and all of the rest owned by government, there's a massive benefit to the dark skies. I'm not saying that private land development doesn't represent a challenge, and that's what we're all struggling with here. But to give 0 lumens when we are taking 45% of our land and contributing it as natural open space is an injustice. We have got to figure out some way formulaically to give a lighting lumen credit for that land. So you can't, that is a factor when you and I talked about what we agreed with. We have not yet figured out how to capture that.
Yeah, and we're not addressing that yet.
Well, you're gonna get a set of public comments that are gonna say, you can't take it from us and then ignore it.
I'm trying to get a question in. When you negotiate with the city or county for these to take on the roads, do they require that you light the roads? I didn't think there was a requirement to light the roads.
Bill, there's a safety concern on our ends in my developments that I illuminate the roads, okay? There's parts of Marana that I've looked at projects where they don't. I think they're too dark and I don't think they're that safe.
No, I understand that you might desire to light it, but I was understanding the previous speaker as saying they are taking on a responsibility by the city or the county, and I don't think the city or the county feel they have a responsibility that they have to light all roads. I think there are many neighborhoods, I've lived in them in Tucson, that don't have lighting. I'm just trying to understand what is required, not what's desired. I'm trying to help with what's desired as well, but the statement was fairly strong that something's being taken away, and I want to understand what the facts are.
You are correct that when we assume the responsibility for constructing roads that would be public, and or create private roads that historically would have been public, we are not necessarily required to light those. But the challenge is that the liability is also being transferred.
The safety
So-
liabilities, you have to demonstrate the roads are safe.
So from a safety standpoint, it is, no one here wants to protect the observatories, and everybody in this room wants to protect the observatories. None of us want to continue to have our region on the short list of the most dangerous roadways for cyclists and pedestrians, which we currently have.
Okay, thanks. I understand. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Go ahead.
This is Clayton with the City of Tucson. I just wanted to provide another layer of clarification for everybody to make sure that we're all talking the same language. The code, the outdoor lighting code, chapter 8 for illumination of right-of-ways currently states that lighting of public and private right-of-ways shall be fully shielded. It, in the very first paragraph of that chapter, identifies that it includes both public and private. So the code does address this to some extent already, and I think that's of value. Something else that should be considered is that chapter 8 regulates light in a different fashion than private property. It's regulated based on foot candles, whereas private property is regulated by lumens. Just like the sign chapter is regulated by nits. So we have different measurements here for these different types of areas to be illuminated. But also it was brought up as one of the comments that were made related to roadway lighting reference back to commercial and residential, and that's not applicable to the roadways. Private property is regulated based on whether it is commercial or residential. And I think the recommendation is to, for the private property, not roadways, not signs, the private property, if it is developed as a commercial property, which is to say it is a commercial building intended for the public, it would be associated with the commercial lumen caps for private property, whereas residential developed private property would have the residential lumen caps. So I just want to point out that there's several different things that are being talked about at the same conversation.
And I think my point was specific to HOA, either owned or managed. And so I appreciate your clarification. I guess the further clarification would be, how are you going to treat acreage that has been transferred from private ownership to HOA ownership, which is a category of a business nonprofit, legally, technically. And when the HOA is required to sign a maintenance agreement with the jurisdiction for land that may be in public ownership, but the maintenance of it has been transferred to the HOA. So to your point about saying that private owned roadways are treated as public, I think I was responding to the subcommittee statement that they were going to treat HOA lands as commercial, not resident, HOA common area lands as commercial and not residential. So I don't know whether an HOA managed public roadway, how, in light of today's discussion, how it's going to be treated.
Just for committee discussion, it brings up a lot of, I'd like to back down to something a little more simplistic, which is to say that the difference between commercial and residential should be really, really easy. The only thing that's residential is if you're building a if you have a building constructed that has one dwelling unit, or two dwelling units, or three dwelling units, or four dwelling units. That, any of those, a building that's got those, that's residential. And if that's being built on its own lot, that lot and that dwelling unit is subject to the residential outdoor lighting code lumen caps. Anything else you're building, it essentially becomes commercial. Because even multifamily, if you have strictly an apartment house, 8 apartments or 300 apartments, they're all dwelling units. It's not residential by the outdoor lighting, it's commercial. It's commercial lumen caps. So from just the building side, what I think now we're moving into the discussion, well, when is it a roadway? Or when is it just a construction? Yeah, a park, an amphitheater, or now you've got your overall area and you have a natural area that you can't do anything on. You count those lumens as not. That's what all this is moving around. And all of that is independent of, those are more application sides as opposed to technical things in terms of should the lumen cap be and what color should the light be and all these other things.
I think what you're saying is that the land designation from your standpoint should be based upon the vertical construction type. I can have a land designation that is residential or commercial, right? For the zoning code. But what you're saying is residential is 1 to 4 units.
That's how we have it defined.
Right, I mean,
And in current code, the 2012 code, it's 1 or 2 family units.
I know, no, I understand that. I think the HOA ownership is, you know, it's kind of its own beast.
It might be, but I think it maybe is simpler than people want to think it is. And maybe the complexity is more the public ways, whether they're roadways or pathways or anything versus.
But I don't think you want to take HOA common area and designate it commercial, because then you're going to bifurcate it. Because we have, like I said, we have 670 acres of natural open space. I don't think you want to designate that commercial in Rocky Cay. I'm happy if you do, go ahead.
But
No, we get a lot more lumens it's not.
Dennis, would the open space even count? I thought it's not developed area.
But that goes to Priscilla's concern, which is then you're taking her area away from how much lighting you could have.
Why,
So if-
why? No, I don't, that's what I'm not understanding. So maybe you can explain it to me. If it's not developed, it doesn't count whether it's part of the homeowners association or commercial plot or anything. It's just land, right?
As the code exists.
This is why we're so confused.
But no, but that means we haven't taken away anything.
No, we are talking about, it is the discussion about whether to include natural open space when it is part of a development site plan has its own issue. There are commercial, retail, shopping centers that have natural open space as part of the development site plan. Okay, so, and you have to perform sort of microsurgery if you want to extract the lumen allowance from that natural open space. That's its own injustice that I can become righteously indignant about. Set that aside, there is adjacent corridors of natural open space that run between residential developments and commercial developments throughout this community that are mandated. And there is an obligation that is put on the private sector to maintain those as natural open space. whether or not there is any credit given to the adjoining land use is a separate discussion. Those two we've talked about before at previous meetings. Today, the issue came up about the subcommittee saying, how are we going to classify HOA common area? Which also there is a designated common area in commercial projects too. So it's not only residential developments and mixed use master plans. There's designated common area in commercial development site plans and in residential subdivision plans that gets transferred to a third party that has its own tax ID, its own fiduciary obligations under the law, and is responsible in perpetuity for the management of those lands. Whether that's going to be classified as residential or commercial or some hybrid is, I think, the topic that came out of the subcommittee into today's discussion, as I understand it. And Eloise and I have just, Eloise is representing a developed HOA that has already been fully built out and now has a maintenance responsibility for that HOA common area. And it also is different types, whether it's roadways or parks or drainage ways or those kinds of things. It's one thing. I represent a project at least in Rocky Cay that is 25% built out with 75% left to go. That is a combination of commercial, residential, and open space. And how do you want to classify those HOA lands?
So am I hearing it correctly, Priscilla, that you would like credit for the non-lit vacant lands that you have to give up to go to the commercial or residential areas?
I'm going to say yes to that, understanding the complexity of that ask. So I'm not saying that it's a one-for-one. I think it is different, whether it's in the middle of a development site plan or whether it is adjacent to it. But every private acre that is possible for development, our state needs for our tax-based future. If you project out our state and the fact that state lands are being taken to auction, we will not run through our state land at its current auction rate for more than 1,000 years. So we cannot, it's just not happening. The amount of state land that has transferred into private land ownership in the last 30 years in Pima County is fractional. So the Native American lands, the BLM lands, the national park lands, there is a massive amount of public land that is contributing to our dark skies. When you come on to private land where it is private dollars that are funding it, and we have used all of our money at risk to become contributing taxpayers to our state and to our jurisdictions, and you want to mandate significant amounts of natural open space on private land and take it out of the future of the economic coffers of our state that pay for our public parks and that pay for public safety, it's death by 1,000 cuts. At some point, the fact that that we are responsible stewards for that natural open space deserves some credit when we get into the regulatory environment. And I do think that there should be some lumen credit when it is internal open space with adjacent land, as opposed to just saying, thank you very much. Thank you for taking it onto your obligation and onto your, as a Diamond Ventures, as a privately family-owned business with 20 employees, we appreciate very much. you building public roads, you building parks, you maintaining our drainage for us, and you maintaining all of this natural open space for our wildlife corridors and our riparian corridors and all of the enjoyment. To ask for some little lumen cap credit for that, I think is completely reasonable. It's not a heinous request. I think it's worthy of some consideration.
Is that something, Clayton and, Dan, is that something put in the code, or is that something negotiable with the city and the county? That we're doing this, can you give us some more limits?
This is Clayton with the city of Tucson. We would not be in a position to respond to this immediately. It would have to be something we would have to look at. Come back to.
Yeah, 'cause personally, I don't think that's something that can go in the code. It has to be a negotiation, you know, because there's other things the city and the county negotiate in doing.
Craig, what this comes to is the fundamental rule that we're saying that how you count your acreage is developed acres. So developed acres, somebody just buys a small parcel, they buy a 1 acre parcel, whether it's commercial or residential, it's already in town. You're likely not gonna have to set anything aside, so they get the whole 1 acre, they can put 1 acre of light in. But what I'm hearing is the problem is you buy 100 acres, but now you have to take 30 of that and say, I'm never, ever gonna do anything on it. And leaving only 70 acres that you can develop. So you're actually
Penalizing the property.
you're getting fewer total lumens allowed for the 100 acres. Of course, you're still only building on the 70
Right.
out of the 100. So that's really the crux of it, as to whether you should be able to take that 30% of lumens and add them onto the
Other
other,
portion of that 30.
or
Right.
could there be some factor put
Right.
to it?
So to me, the challenge here is that the Outdoor Lighting Code Committee isn't a zoning committee. It's not an economic development committee. We're a lighting code committee. And some of this is whether the community, the county and the city want any of this land developed. I could make an argument that the developers are being allowed to develop 70 acres at the cost of 100 acres of purchase, because the county and the city didn't really want any of it developed, but we're making a deal to enable some of it to be developed. I'm not saying
Well,
that's
City
the
and
argument, but
county's annual budget deficits, I do think that the city and county recognize that they need to increase, and they are in the process of increasing fees on the private sector. I don't think they have a fee on the observatories, the city or the county. They are increasing application fees, all kinds of fees on the private sector. And I do think they recognize that they need to increase their tax base.
right,
So,
and the observatories are a major part of that. We, as you know, I've provided the information before. We have an annual economic impact on the economy of Southern Arizona of 560 million and over 3,000 jobs. So there's just like
Sure.
there is a city and county interest in development. I'm not arguing that. I'm just not sure this is the committee to talk
I
about the relative value of it.
defining the lumen cap for developable area, for the developed area, then when open space is a jurisdictional requirement and condition of the developed area, it should be included. That is why I am making a case that is part of this committee. If you define the developed area, and that developed area in the city of Tucson or Pima County includes 70 acres of future pads and vertical construction, and the city or county requires 30 acres of it as natural open space, that is part of the developed area. Whatever is in the application that goes before city council and the board of supervisors, whatever the development services staff report is written on with their recommendation for approval or denial or approval with conditions, that perimeter boundary is, if it includes natural open space, it should have, it be included in the outdoor lighting code's definition of developed area, and there should be some consideration of that acreage that is not going to be developed.
And you feel we should put that language into the outdoor lighting code?
Yes, I think the definition of the developed area and whatever the site area is, it is in the glossary. There have been several attempts and it should be considered. The other option is if there is a master lighting plan, then the applicant could take the initiative and ask for consideration when they do the master lighting plan.
What restrictions are there on how the land gets split up in the future? Because I could support what you're proposing but my concern is that we usually give a certain number of lumens for developed area for a parcel, but then if a parcel gets split and you didn't, and all the lighting was left behind, and then let's say, so what restrictions, how firm is it that the land that's set aside never to be developed really can never be developed? Or does it just take getting the city and county to change their mind and allow you to develop it?
It's very firm, but I would let the jurisdiction speak to that. But when we did a development site plan, it is what cannot be developed on is defined.
And
It cannot be,
it can't be changed.
can't be changed.
I'd
So
like,
that cannot be, the natural open space embedded in our projects cannot be sold, lot split, go to a private developer, any of that kind of stuff.
Executive
guess I-
orders can't change it.
Nope.
I guess I'm seeing it from a slightly different way, and granted, I'm trying to do my best to help the observatories here. But, assuming that our lighting, lumen caps allow 100% development of the developed area and provide enough lighting so that everything can be done per acceptable lighting standards, then there should be enough lumens without needing to put extra lumens from the undeveloped portion. But it's a different argument when you move into the E1s, where we believe that the lumen caps would not allow you to fully illuminate your developed area to those nationally recognized standards. So
I'm not touching E1s. I'm not even, I'm pretty brave. I'm not brave enough to touch E1s.
honestly,
To me,
Priscilla,
E1s
I think your argument is stronger in an E1 area than it is to an E2 and above, as long as the lumen caps give you enough lumens per acre of your developed area. I mean, if you chose to build a project by acquiring a 70-acre site that did not have any undeveloped natural areas in it, so you could fully develop it. You know, you do another Elcon shopping center that is literally built line to line. There, you can use all that area. I guess what I'm hearing is that you can't build anything new now, that when you acquire this new land, you always have to set aside.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The WASH ERZ ordinance in the city of Tucson, the NPPO, the regulated riparian areas, the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection, the Sonoran.
Then I'm sort of hearing the thing then, which is that then we've got to lower the lumen caps a little more. If we give you those lumens, then we have to pull the lumen caps down.
Well, I think what Priscilla is having the issue with also is that Rocky K is in area E2. And we have had discussion
Well, I
about
think we need to.
changing that
I think those
designation.
need to go up. Some of those
Absolutely.
lumen caps are gonna have. to go in too.
I'm trying to provide you a half a dozen reasonable solutions. Because I care about the land-based observatories. I care about the satellite arrays that are threatening our land-based observatories. And I do recognize that we have land-based observatories in the mountain ranges around Tucson that are global unicorns, right? That are really incredibly special. So there's nothing in all of the comments that I have made that say, I think that private developers should be able to do something at the expense of a closed ground-based observatory. What I have done is not prioritized. I've come here and said, what if you tried this? What if you tried this? What if you tried this? And I have not said, I want you to accommodate every one of those solutions. I just keep, because I feel that the private sector and the future economic base of our region hasn't really been vocal in these committees. So I'm trying to be the point of the spear for lots of private companies that aren't here today to say, whatever the combination is that goes into the final ordinance, it can be some combination of all these things. And believe me, I've read more outdoor lighting code ordinances that are around the world, probably than at least the non-astronomers that are participating in this. So I am just, every idea that I'm presenting to you, I do believe could work and could work in conjunction with protecting the observatories. So.
Go ahead, Victor.
I'll get to my two simple questions, but first, talking about roads, we were talking about signs. And I remember being in the meeting room across the street when a sign designer talks about all driving up and down these roads and seeing all these signs, highly lit up at night, and they're not meeting code. So now I'm confused. Our sign, there's a sign code, but it seems like the lighting code needs to address signs if they're putting a lot of light pollution up there. So I'm just, I'm not sure where we're going with the signs right now. My simple questions are, I'm Steve Dole. I'm here for Tucson Mountain Association. We're one of the neighborhood associations on here, and there's several other neighborhood groups that stopped coming to these meetings. And I've talked to some of them, and they wondered when are they going to have an opportunity to see a draft code and provide comments, because they have not been participating. So my simple question is there going to be another draft code and a 30-day or 60-day comment period?
The answer is yes. The
Okay.
timing I can't speak to.
Okay, my last question is, do you think this lighting code will go before mayor, council, and board of supervisors this year?
That's our expectation, yes.
Thank you.
Have anybody else that wants to speak? Committee members?
Anybody online?
Anybody online? Okay, I think we need to move to our final agenda item, which is adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn? We don't have to do that anymore, do we?
We're adjourned.
Adjourn. Perfect.
Thank you. Is subcommittee meeting scheduled?
Well, I have Rob's phone.